Desperation. Desperate. Right. Hey, time for us to desperate and have a good tack. Tack. I didn't say tack. You said tack.
Tack.
Tack. Tack.
I didn't say tack.
Tack a one.
You said tack.
Tack. I didn't. A tack to you all, Tackertons. This is cock. Tack. Cock.
This is cock.
Cock tack.
Kings
they're
King.
They're like, go back to the music parody.
Yeah.
Not the Tourette's, whatever this is. Yeah, it's Kings of King, which we sometimes call cock and sometimes call tack cock when it's appropriate, which, hey, wouldn't you know it is right now. I'm Michael Swaim.
Hey, I'm Abe Epperson.
And we're here to desperate and have a good time. We're talking about Stephen King's Desperation. And as we always do, cover an adapted work of Stephen King. This one's a made-for-TV movie of the year... Abe usually knows
2006.
2006.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, should we just get right into it? Or
I think so. I mean, this is just kind of one of the standalone episodes, you know?
Yeah.
We're like in it now, and we're just like churning.
Yeah, we don't have any meta stuff to say
King.
about the state of the show or anything like that. No, I think that's right. So let's slide right in to Under the Dome.
Our best guess puts the dome at 20,000 feet, sir.
Did he just call it a dome?
You think we might be stuck in here a while?
This is good because I do have a ton to say about this movie, but, you know, you got to wait for the right segment before you get off the bus.
Everything in its right place.
So this is the segment where we synopsize the thing as if we were aliens observing it from high under a dome. I finally get it.
It's just a plot
under
synopsis.
A dome. Who wants to do it? Well, it's
good.
I don't know if people...
I mean, we can share it if you want.
I don't know how many of y'all have recently watched the made-for-TV version of Desperation. It is available on Amazon Prime, so you very well could have. And if you did, just for the purposes of listening to this, we're honored. But for those who didn't, i.e. the majority of you, Abe, who's going to recap Desperation?
I can do.
Oh, God, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Because full disclosure, I watched it a full week ago, which is a little longer than you should do if you're going to recap something successfully.
Right, that's true. I watched it on a few days ago, so I'm a little bit better. So we're in the Nevada desert. There's a town. It's a ghost town. It's called Desperation. But the way in which we kind of entry to that is that we open up on our first two characters, Peter and Mary Jackson. They're driving. And they're stopped by a sheriff, Colleen Tragan, who is played by Ron Perlman. He basically is very awkward and kind of terrifying. But then things take a turn when he opens their trunk and finds that they have a huge bag of weed. So he takes him, into the back of his car, and he drives to the police station of Desperation. As they drive through, they see a bunch of people dead on the ground, and it's very clear that this whole town is basically dead, and he seems to be the only person in the town. They walk through some more dead bodies as they go to their jail cell, in which at one point Ron Perlman says to them that he's going to kill them, but then immediately acts like he didn't say that. He also has this strange tic that over the course of the film starts to become more pronounced, which is that he'll just randomly throw in the word tack into anything that he's saying, which we learn later has to deal with he is possessed. He is a possessed man. He's probably a dead man. We meet several other people who are also in jail cells. So he's basically just he's basically just kidnapped a bunch of people. And I don't know. Did you want to pull anyone out? I didn't think it was very important to say who was there. There's like a doctor, but the most important.
I just wrote, townspeople, jail.
Townspeople.
We meet them all. They're there.
They're there, and they have opinions on stuff. Because
each of them, it's exactly like a novel would be. Each of them has their little perspective. You get to know it,
right? And they're
it's
fodder
like
for dead.
Yeah,
you kind of know how it goes. But the important one is David.
David's
He's this little
important,
boy.
you guys.
He's important. He's a special little boy, and he gets his own cell. He gets his own cell, and he is apparently, we learn over their conversations that he has some kind of communion with God. He can somehow, like, God is basically talking through him or to him. It's very unclear at this point, but he reveals that he prays to God, and God made his presence known to him by saving his friend Brian from the brink of death in an earlier, which is kind of one of the most hilarious scenes that I've ever seen in a flashback. They launch this kid against the wall. It's ridiculous.
Right.
His head is entirely
But then
crushed.
his mom's like, but how could God exist? Because we just saw Colleen Tragian shoot your sister in the head. Like, how could God exist?
Exactly.
So they're immediately at odds.
Yeah. Meanwhile, so while they're talking, the reason that they can get away with this is that Ron Perlman is then now gone out to the road again to canvass for some more
gathering people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he meets a famous author, ding, 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 Stephen King,
dude.
Johnny Marinville, who is played by Tom Skerritt, who is like he's basically a has-been biker, I guess. But I mean, maybe it's not, that's being mean. It's not that he's a has-been. It's that he's at the, twilight of his life.
But it absolutely is as if Stephen King wrote a story and it was like, and I'm there and I'm on a motorcycle. I got a leather jacket.
Yeah. He stops to urinate in the desert and just, of course, Ron Perlman appears in a cop car. All of us have experienced from time to time. And he shows up and it's very clear that he's been planting these marijuana bags because he keeps finding them and it's literally the same bag.
Yeah.
So he's basically he's just a liar. He's a cop. He's a liar. He's possessed. He's starting to say tack. At this point, his face is now becoming covered in sores. Yeah, so basically now he's scooped up Johnny, and Johnny's kind of our ad hoc protagonist. It's very strange.
He's
kind
Han
of
Solo,
an
bro. He's Stephen King Han
he's
Solo.
Kind of So he's brought into the
wild card,
mix.
loose cannon. He gets the job done.
And then what happens? Then we have David realizes that there's a scene where David basically realizes that
he drags the mom out in the night. That's what he
drags the mom out in the
night.
night, and off screen we haven't seen it yet. Ellen is her name. Ron Perlman's out of the picture now. Tack, the name of this
thing that has Ron Perlman,
the thing that has now possessed Ellen, which is revealed when David soaps himself up with a bar of soap while he's in his jail cell, so he can slip through the bars because he's small enough to do it. And as he goes out, he sees a bunch of more dead people. He also sees some sinister imagery. That's the other thing, is that we have it kind of intercut.
Oh, and he's at one moment he meets the lesser known brother from Wings. He's like, "Hey, I loved you on Wings."
Steven. Oh yeah, I forgot entirely
they
about
bond
Steven
over that. Steven Weber.
Yeah. Right. So
they also
Steve
find
Weber,
a bunch of dead bodies. They just kind of dick around in the ghost town and have haunted stuff happen to them.
Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah.
But Steve Weber's there and he works for Johnny, the Tom Skerritt fella, the older motorcyclist, and he's following him around because he has his hog in the back, he's like the roadie equivalent, and he was basically texting or he's trying to call during the whole Ron Perlman incident. So now basically by the time that we get back to the intercuts where we're now following David slipping through the bars and whatnot, we're also following this other character, Steven, who's picks up a hitchhiker, Cynthia, and they're just searching around town to try to find Johnny, just because Johnny kind of sent an SOS via phone. That night they kind of meet up with other escaped
At
prisoners
the
from
theater.
jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the theater, because basically they all broke out because of
Little Soapy David.
Little Soapy David
Broke
opens
him
the
out.
jail cells.
But then you find out, Ellen/Tack can talk to animals. So she asks some
That's the other
spiders,
thing.
where did they go? And the spiders are like, they went to the theater. And she asks a mountain lion, can you attack them? And it goes, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the other thing, is that throughout this movie, and I've just kind of failed to mention it just because it's like more flashbacks and just like random edits during the transition sequences, we're getting a lot of animal imagery. Like there's cats that have been like nailed up,
Crucified, yeah.
And crucified all around like the speed limit signs, and just like everywhere there seems to be animals. They're literally like taking over the town, and it's usually like scorpions, snakes, cougars. It's like desert animals. But yeah, so he's kind of connected. We get this general sense that with the possession, he's controlling spiders, kind of thing. And the only way that Ellen really knows where they're at is, sends a cougar to say like, go find them. But also at one point, a bunch of spiders go around a picture of the movie theater. So it's like there's some weird connection to the animal spirits, or like what they're seeing.
But also I love that they could only communicate if you happen to have a picture of the answer to the question around you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, while Steven
while they're dicking around at the theater, also wearing Hudsucker, the old man character, tells them all about the history of the town and the China Pit, which is a big hole near town.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, I bet that's where all this evil shit's coming from. And the movie like pretty quickly lets you know, yeah, he's right. That's where it's coming from.
We see some ghosts in the theater, and we see old footage. Specifically, the ghost leads David to see through like a supernatural
Projector,
like vision, projector of like how Tack came
basically
to
the exposition.
The it basically just says everything. And meanwhile, we kind of cut to so I think the ghost, I think that's who they're saying Pi was. I didn't know whose the ghost's relation was to everyone else's. It's just a little girl that we kept seeing. That was unclear to me.
I thought that was Pi. Yeah, David chases a vision of Pi is what I wrote.
Right.
And then Hudsucker gets killed by the mountain lion.
Right.
But I did write, why does Pi dress like a Victorian school child? Is this a ghost from the past? Yeah.
Right. So at one point, then we get the...
Sorry. Johnny hallucinates that the wildcat is a Viet Cong, so he kills it.
That's definitely a scene.
Delightful.
Now... So Ellen, the possessed by Tack, as mentioned, has this mountain lion, just doing their bidding. They actually kill one of the like prisoners, or like the escapees, and then Ellen abducts one of the women that's with the party, and she wakes up and finds herself like trapped in a shed. With a bunch of scorpions and tarantulas. Basically, it's inferred that Mary's going to be the next host, because it's revealed that Tack kind of uses them all up. Like that's why they have boils and they like start going insane, is that humans can't really take the possession for that long. So that's why all the townspeople are dead, is that it just keeps hopping. It's this force that just hops from person to person and just murders the entire town just because they burn so hot. But Pi, again, a ghost,
of his dead
helps
sister.
her escape, and that forces Tack to have no body. So Tack is now has to go into a bird. So yeah. We kind of get more about the Vietnam the Vietnam flashback because Johnny at a later scene when they're in the pit looking for ways to like kill Tack, Johnny kind of confesses to everyone about he saw a guy in Vietnam when he was there 40 years ago who was actually possessed by Tack, and they blew up the bathroom of a bar. And one of his claims to fame is that like one of the stories that he had that was like he got cred for was that during the war, apparently he saved a bunch of people by alerting that there was a bomb there. And so everyone got out of the bar, and he saved some people just by doing the heroic thing. He reveals that that's a fiction that he essentially made up, and he feels guilty about it because he didn't warn any of the patrons. He just ran out, like, as he feels as a coward. And that's where they kind of have their final, they kind of all, bare their soul.
Well, and they
whatnot.
say God made that happen so that you would believe that Tack is real when this now is happening. So it's like everything happens for a reason, and this is the culmination.
Right. I'm saving it for it because most of the conversations done in passing in this film are usually about God or people's relationship to God.
Right.
Or gods, because, some people consider Tack, some kind of godlike force.
Right.
Now their plan kind of culminates with them deciding to take some explosives to the cave where they know that Tack was found in the pit, or in the mine, I guess. Now, when they're about to enter, the buzzard arrives and kills yet another.
Tack kills David's dad, who was he in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? He's from something.
Man, it's been so long since I've seen that I couldn't even
but
say.
Tack kills dad.
Mm-hmm.
Tack kills dad.
Yep. And Johnny decides that he's going to go in the mine alone. And everyone kind of fights him on it, but like in a Hollywood typical thing.
What if I rode a motorcycle? And what if at the end I sacrificed myself and I was the hero?
Yeah. And they all kind of run with it because, he's a guilty guy. He's got the know-how. And why should we have to, we're like, most of us are children at this point. So
but I also like that Tack at one point when he's fighting Stephen King / Johnny goes, "Come on, big, brave American writer." Is that a trope that writers are super brave and big and like intimidating?
Apparently so. So anyway, Johnny goes into the mine and he falls in a hole because like Tack scares him. And that's like, and at the base of the hole is like, I guess like the
bunch
anus,
of bombs, which is good.
Like, it's like, or the eye, I don't know. It's like the place, it looks like an anus to me, but the point is that it's like where's I think we're supposed to believe is like ground zero for Tack's.
It's the part in Annihilation. It's the bottom of the lighthouse.
It's the lighthouse. Yeah, exactly. And so he blows it up. He ignites the explosives using like a shotgun, like shelling. He like takes the gunpowder out and lights it up, sacrificing himself. The whole thing
literally makes a joke about critics before he blows himself up.
It's the best.
Everyone's a critic. Boom.
And then all the survivors drive away in Steve's truck, and they got the hog in the back. Everything's great. And then I guess there's this kind of like ending because you have to do an ending, especially with Stephen King or just like in general. Horror movies have to kind of do like maybe something else is happening. And maybe part 2, like along the route, they drive from town. They pass by an RV vehicle that was David's family and Peter's sister's car as well. Like they just are going through all of they're driving back out of, hell, so to speak. And they get they stop the truck and get out and get a case from the car. In the back seat, Mary finds a photo album that belonged to David with a picture of Johnny and Pi together. And it's signed by Johnny, which is impossible. So it's one last kind of like, oh yeah, so there's a God and they sometimes do tricks.
And it says, well, but nice tricks to make you feel good after you've been through a hard time. He signed it God is love. And
Yeah,
I just
he's
want to set the
converted.
scene. Great synopsis, dude. It wraps up with the lines, "What do you think, David? Is he love?" And they ask him that because David obviously speaks directly to God. This has been proven. "What do you think, David? Is he love?" "Yeah, I guess so. I guess
Yeah.
God is sort of everything. That's what makes him God." Him,
That's-
motherfuckers. No, that's not the
yeah.
operative word, but that is
Right.
indeed how it ends, and well synopsized.
Thank you. I wanted to cover all our bases because I think that there's some good conversation in this, actually. I found this... I actually didn't hate it. It's pretty run-of-the-mill. I'll definitely say that. But it's... I don't know. We're going to get into it. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's move to our next section. The one that we call Skeleton Crew.
He uses an audio clip from The Mist as the bumper. Just for the record, The Mist is a short story from the collection called, you guessed it, idiot, Skeleton Crew.
Something in the mist! Shut the doors! Shut the doors!
So we're right again. That's why we're the Kings of King. I'm sorry. I love you. But this is the segment where we talk about behind the scenes stuff, the people behind the project, involved with the project. I don't have much to say on the filmmaking side, but this is also where we talk about how it relates to the book, if at all. And I do want to, how about, can you dispense what little there may be that's interesting about the making of this run-of-the-mill ensemble-driven TV horror film?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'll do book shit.
But all the things that I thought were interesting, other than the fact that this kind of is a part of a collaboration, so to speak, between the director, Mick Garris, who has been in as an actor and also directed several made-for-TV Stephen King movies at this point.
6, I think, total.
Yeah, and including The Stand and The Shining. There's a few others in
Frequent
there that we've yet
collaborator.
to cover. Frequent collaborator, and it's just I wanted to point out that name, Mick Garris, just because by listening to this podcast, you're going to hear it a few times, and we can assess what Mick's old approach to these things are, but that's for a different section. Another thing I want to notice is that this is a teleplay by Stephen King, so this is as close as Stephen King ever gets to his vision, so to speak, in the adaptation format, because
Other than
he's
Maximum
adapting.
Overdrive.
Yeah, well, but that doesn't count because they were all high
Mitigating factors.
But yeah, this is literally him adapting himself,
And it feels like Mick Garris is, and he has a few of these. I would call him a Stephen King enabler, and I don't necessarily even mean it negatively. I just mean they are a director who is willing to bow to Stephen King, let Stephen King be Stephen King and play around in the medium, but assists Stephen King in bringing it to life in a different medium. But they're not like Kubrick, where they're going to call you in the middle of the night and say, I fucking changed your book, nerd. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Mick Garris honors Stephen King, and Stephen King probably collaborates frequently with them because they let Stephen King actually feel like they're part of the filmmaking process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's probably an element of truth to that, just because that's how it looks. It may be specious in that I don't understand their collaboration specifically, but it does seem like they do agree on a lot of stuff, as we know from previous episodes. And if you followed Stephen King at all, The Stand and The Shining, two of which Mick Garris directed, are like his favorites. Like, he thinks that they're most true to the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that probably speaks to what you just said, Michael.
Yeah.
Stephen King was inspired to write this story, and it's because he did a cross-country drive in 1991, and he visited a small desert town of Ruth, Nevada, near the U.S. Highway 50, and his first thought was that the town's inhabitants were all dead. I wonder why, Stephen.
Or zombies, or inhabited by evil demons.
I have had that thought with some of those towns.
I've driven by, there's a town called Borax, California that I have driven by where there's like some suburban housing in a desert with a big, tall chain link fence around it. And I saw a child's tricycle leaning against the fence, you know, and you have that moment of like,
Right.
who fucking grows up here? Just
You know who's-
move anywhere else. Why are
You know
you
who that
here?
kid is, though? You know who that kid is?
David? God's
No, the
chosen
name
one?
of the kid. The name of the kid is the Borax Kid.
Borax. Oh, I see. The Borax Bandit. Wrong show, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's right.
Desperation is a companion book that was released under the name Stephen King. And then he released another book called The Regulators under Richard Bachman. And they're sort of companion pieces. They fascinated me as a child because my dad had both the hardcovers growing up. And the hardcovers have, so like Desperation had like fencing with holes in the wood. And through the holes was the cover of Regulators. Does that make sense? And then the Regulators cover had elements borrowed from the Desperation cover.
Cool.
And they're related in the sense that a bunch of the characters that make up the ensemble are the same in both. Like their character traits are the same, but they're arrayed in a different order. Like if you took the same chess pieces and just lined them up differently and told a different story, and in both cases, the villain is Tack. However, not even the rules of what Tack does are necessarily. So, for example, in Desperation, Tack possesses people, but it wears out their bodies. In the Regulators, Tack can only function in this one autistic boy's mind, but has the power to warp reality itself. So I didn't know if they were going to pull any of the Regulators stuff, but I hoped they would. I figured they wouldn't because of the effects needs. But I had forgotten that Desperation is pretty VFX light. Like it's just stuff happening in the real world until you see Tack or whatever, the glowy, whatever it is. But the Regulators is not. It's like, you remember The Simpsons where the ads come to life and the Marlboro man starts snuffing people out? It's like that because the kid is obsessed with garish Americana and they all come to life and start slaughtering everyone in the town.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. It's really cool. And the Tack lore is super cool. And Tack, for example, is called the outsider in the pantheon of Stephen King cosmology specifically because Tack does not, so there's like a whole pantheon in the Dark Tower. And like, I think Pennywise / it is one of these creatures from the same outer realm that they're trying to hold off in Dark Tower. But, Tack is like unrelated to all those. The Regulators and Desperation form a pocket universe that is separate, and there's references in the Dark Tower series to like the outsider and Tack as like a loose cannon. So I think that's very telling for Desperation, only insofar as this fails the Joker test. Like you can't, like if you think it through from Tack's point of view, so to speak, it's pretty tough to tell why Tack is doing whatever Tack is doing at any given time. Tack just does shit.
Right.
And whether you accept that or not, I think we'll dig into the ways that compromises maybe the tension that you're trying to build in some cases, but it also heightens the feeling of chaos and you don't know what the fuck is going on in this. And it's very true to the book, but I think the book delved more into like the lore of what's going on with Tack. And that's all I got because everything I want to start tugging at actually gets into the story. But I do love Ron Perlman. Ron Perlman rips.
He does a pretty good job.
And I bet he had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. I was sad to see that he's actually briefly in the film. He's dominant for the first half hour.
Yeah.
You know, he's the thread in which we follow, and
he's
every scene is his scene, and if you were to be pulled over, I mean, cops are already terrifying, but if it was Ron Perlman and you were alone in the desert, that is probably top 5 most terrifying nightmares that I've had. You know, just Ron Perlman looking right through your window, right into your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he did a really good job, I thought, in this movie, because it's kind of a wild character. You know, it's big.
Sorry, I'm looking up shit like, is Tack Pennywise? Is Tack the Crimson King? Because I forget all the details. I used to know it all.
Well, that's a good signal for, because let's
talk about this movie.
Talk about what we want to talk about.
Let's talk about
what we want to talk about is it.
Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude.
And the first thing I wanted to talk about is what we'll go last in, first out. So on the same thread, Ron Perlman's use in this, I think, first off, the reason I think Stephen King didn't have a lot of oversight on the teleplay is the dialogue line to line feels so King in that he takes big goofy swings. Sometimes it gives you a very unique, poignant, or not even poignant, but powerful image or just evocative imagist line like, get up, you worthless piece of crap. You've been redefined. You're in the house of the wolf and the scorpion. Like, to me, that's cool. And you have a right to an attorney. I'm going to kill you if you do not want an attorney. I'm like, that's cool. That's very effective. But then like, eat me, said the cake to Alice. Or, there's equally lines where you cringe because you're like, no one has said that since 1951 over like an egg cream.
And he's right. Yeah. And he's repurposing it for a 2000s thing.
Yeah.
And it feels dated in that time zone already. It feels out of place, in hindsight, because it's like, no, you're just out of time in two ways,
Right.
It's very strange.
And I do think I would levy the critique at this film that was levied a lot at our old drafts of the movie we're working on, which is that because the beginning is just Ron Perlman gathering people up and we never fully understand TAC. It's a mystery. TAC is, unknowable, their motivations. It feels like there's no direct thread pulling us forward for a long time. For example, the first sequence reminded me a lot of Nocturnal Animals, and I know you've seen that. And it's it's made for TV, so it's a little less intense, but Nocturnal Animals has another sequence where in the desert on the side of the road some people are slowly coerced into going with someone bad. And it feels terrible, but it also doesn't feel like you're lost with no plot because they have a framing device about a relationship that fell apart. And all that matters is that the people involved have stakes and a forward momentum. And it did really bother me how this felt like, and this could just be because he's a novelist, but it felt like 45 minutes of Ron Perlman just doing stuff. Then you finally figured out, oh, it's about God. Okay. It's about God. And then for better or worse, it stays on track and it's about God versus TAC. And you understand the arc is going to be, is there a God or isn't there? How can there be horrible things in the world? Oh, there is a God. I believe in faith. The end. And I think that's a pretty trite story to tell, but at least it has a shape. It does the thing. I did think it was weird how Ron Perlman's sequence, I'll shut up about it, but it felt like formless. That's all.
Yeah, I think King has this tendency I've noticed with a lot of, I'm thinking Thinner. I'm thinking of a lot of them made for TV stories that are less epic. So I would discount, or I wouldn't count the, Dr. Sleep, Shining universe. I know it's all one universe, or like Dark Tower, which you can tell that there's so much attention to the world building. The ones that feel more like an X-Files episode that are kind of like, here's just a short story. I'm noticing this tendency that he has this real strong A-B kind of form where it's like, let's set him up and then let's knock him down. Like he really likes to put all of the heavy lifting in Act 1 for the idea of the building up of the villain to show how how powerful this villain is. And then it has the tendency to kind of make it underwhelming in Act 2 and 3 and and just in terms of when the conflict is most important to the protagonists, they kind of just do one thing that gets them done, that takes care of everything. Like they just explode it and it worked. Yeah. Or even in It, and then we went in the sewer and then what? And then we we killed the spider with our brains. And the reason that I mentioned that is atypical in terms of like what we'd call a typical hero tale in Western culture. You know, obviously there's so many different ways to skin a cat, but those typically the standard in which they employ is that they try to set up small little thresholds for the protagonist to go through, that every time that they try to assert themselves, become closer to their goal, the conflict or the antagonist or the villain snaps them back, and it just feels insurmountable all the way until Act 3, and then they finally persevere. Now, that's not what Stephen King does with these stories. It doesn't seem like. In fact, Tack and everybody else feel like they're not even in the same movie until the very final culmination. And that's why we get that, because I don't know. My personal theory is that there's something about Stephen King loves shapelessness. He thinks that something nebulous and unknown is terrifying on its own.
And he's not totally wrong about that. Obviously,
He's
that's
not.
true.
And I think that, and I don't mean like shapelessness in terms of form, but I think that, you know, form is reflecting content in this. So he's like, I want them to be in the dark, my protagonist to be in the dark about Tack the whole time, until they're just like, fuck it, let's just try to blow it up. Oh, it worked. Great.
Right.
And that's hard for people to get into. I think as an audience member, the tendency is we dislike those stories a little bit more because we don't have the feeling of that perseverance. We don't have that feeling of like falling down and getting back up again, and falling down and getting back up again, and then falling down and finally winning, you know, kind of thing.
My favorite shit, like The Wire or I don't know why I would say Feston's one of my favorite, but it strikes me as one of these that's built this way. But my favorite shit is where everyone just has personal self-interest balanced against the other self-interests, you know, present in the plot. And those can lead to like, I'm willing to hurt you to get my thing. Or in a more accessible version of that would be like Michael Keaton as Vulture and Spider-Man. Like I actually do think that's one shade more interesting, where you are like, the villain kind of has a point. Of course, that's more interesting and more true to life than Tack. Like, oh, who knows? He's just an asshole. Like Tack is just a prick.
Right.
Like, who knows what he's thinking of?
Because I think Stephen King,
at least in the movie version,
he scribes in the forms of gods, things that are just doing their force. They're not like,
they are that manifest
out to get you personally. They're out to get the world because they're chaos, or they're, you know. And this coming so late in his career, I don't think it's immune to the overabundance of Easter eggs and self-references and like, man, you referenced The Shining rough. And this has a red rum in it, straight up. Red rum on the wall, red rum dog. For in the sequence murder. Where they fight a murder dog, which is also a ripoff of Cujo. So like, it's just this layer cake of referential Stephen King shit. And we're not done with the Shining stuff because they do it twice. One time they flush a urinal and blood comes out. One time they play a slot machine and blood comes out. Play it, blood. While we're there, just because I'm starting to love, there's like a mini section in it where I'm just trying to dispense all the tropes that come up time and time again. Course. And it's just so crazy how much there are. We have an author as a main character or key supporting character.
And not just an author, but Stephen King. It's like clearly Stephen King. Yeah.
Other visible pronunciations of like, it's like, it's always Americana, right? And like writing motorcycles is a part of that. That's a subculture of Americana. And in that road culture, a writer is typically thought of as an outsider themselves. They're usually seen outside the law, kind of a vigilante. There's this feeling of rural versus urban that comes up time and time again. This one is a little bit more subtle because it all kind of takes place in one town. So you don't actually see characters from both sides of those, that fence in conflict. But you notice through Ron Perlman mainly, he says a few times like, you yuppie pieces of shit. Like, this is just
Yuppies
like
killed
you, 'cause you're
Princess Di, you know that?
Yeah,
Wasn't she beautiful?
yeah. Big city, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, that's something that King tries to take advantage of. It's like a bullying that occurs in Americana, just pointing that out. A familiar cop in this case, with this kind of, usually he tries to take something that's familiar, like a clown, let's say a birthday clown, and tries to make it terrifying.
Seems so cliche at this point, but he helped make it that way.
He's also fascinated with the representation of the desert, as we see in The Stand and we see in Dark Tower. He likes the arid kind of emptiness of the desert.
A lot of skeletons. It's spooky.
It's spooky. Animal imagery once again comes up. A lot of his Stephen King's villains are described as something else, usually as like spiders or whatnot. In this one, we get a lot of wolves, scorpions, spiders, and snakes, and of course a mountain lion who's like the king of the, or not mountain lion, but yeah, I guess
Wildcat.
Yeah,
Wildcat.
Yeah, shapeshifters as well. We got shapeshifters in this one. He loves that. So it's just we have a boy. In this case, a child with direct communion to a power. Or in this case, it's God.
As Tack calls him, just a little prey boy in a baseball shirt.
Yeah,
little prey boy.
So it's much like Abra in The Shining and Dr. Sleep communing with other psychics, or Duddits with Mr. Gray. You mentioned the dogs. I don't know if it's a phase or it's just less common, but there's still a noticeable trope that I'm starting to see as I get more familiar with more King stories, that like believers that question the amorality of God, or specifically asking like, what kind of God does that? And then pointing to that worthiness of God. That is something that's come up more than once. And I think that's interesting. You know, just because Stephen King, a man of faith, is always trying to make his characters more or less faithful, you know, look at Green Mile, et cetera, et cetera. So those are just things I noticed, you know, more other tropes.
Good shit, man.
Yeah.
Good shit. I'm
what else?
Just because I'm a big dialogue boy, like I just notice all the lines that I either liked or thought were notably like jump the shark. But you want to know how cruel God is? How fantastically cruel. And that's such an object lesson for writers out there. Fantastically. Like, this is why they talk about it being a trope to kill adverbs from your script, because that's the word that tipped it. That line was okay and naturalistic until you had, you want to know how cruel God is, kid? How fantastically cruel. Dude, this guy just learned that, like, the devil is real. I don't know. It's just a little eloquent for that moment. How fantastically cruel? Sometimes he makes us live. Oh, and yeah, I think you're dead on. I think King has a recurring theme that is, look, there's only so many things that are true, and it's not a lot, like that we know to be true, that stand the test of time. And one is this observation about it's hard to have faith sometimes because there's so much suffering in the world, and it feels like by any conception, a creature with consciousness and control, the balance would be a little better, but that's what makes it faith.
Right.
And he loves that. He loves that. But that's what makes it faith. And and they win anyway. Hooray.
That's kind of what actually makes this good to me, is that I know we keep using words like it's trite or it's very like pulpy, like in terms of like how
it's well-trod ground. I'm not saying that with judgment.
That's fair. That is fair. Absolutely. But the deconstruction of faith that Stephen King does in this and other works, but like this is a big one because his characters confront it and talk about it.
The
casually.
kid makes loaves and fishes miracle happen. Like he feeds them with less food than he should be able to. It is as religious as, certainly it's the most religious, explicitly Christian one that we've covered on this show so far. And I think it might be among the most Christian things Stephen King has been a part of.
Right. I find that actually pretty interesting because it gets to the heart of So there's a few things that I started to notice. So I actually have like this weird theory, right?
Mm-hmm. You usually
that
do.
I don't think Stephen King knows that he's doing it, because I know how clever he is. He's actually pretty clever. He's very smart with like omitting stuff, especially like he finds a way to really focus your lens as the viewer into the thing that he wants to talk about very, very well. And that takes some element of cleverness. And there's stuff that is being done by the adaptation. I don't know if the books did it to such an extent, but it's definitely in the DNA of the story. And I want to kind of paint this picture where, let's start here. David, throughout the whole movie, wears a Cleveland Indian shirt that is splattered with blood. There's constant reminders that the enslavement of people marked in the town with this kind of curse are doing the bidding of a god, essentially. They are all dead,
But also, yeah,
either because he killed them, but they enslaved the possession of someone.
Racism
right?
against Chinese Americans and the whole
Exactly.
the enslavement for the purposes of building the transcontinental railroads is a big part of all the flashbacks and all the info dump.
And yeah, exactly.
It's just
especially it's a road movie, and we're talking about like Chinese working.
It's just like The
workers
Shining.
at the
You're like,
Chinese
it's an
Center.
evil place because a bunch of horrible shit happened.
The Vietnam imagery evokes a kind of like colonist grief and guilt that when we look to the actual story of what he tells, Tom Skerritt's telling a story of feels guilty because he felt like he didn't save them.
Yeah.
That is the Vietnam conflict from the perspective of an American
America.
soldier, if I've ever heard one. There's a lot of white guilt in this imagery in this movie. There's old-timey, like, racist, newsreels and such that use ethnic slurs of that time. I think it's meant to categorize the horror into specifically a previous atrocity, because that's something King does a lot. A lot of horror movies do that, like Buffy or whatnot. It's
Candyman.
like, oh, the source of the power, this atrocity caused this thing to be.
Evil begets evil, pain
now,
begets pain.
I get the sense that Tack is probably more like, like it, where it's like it existed a lot through time.
Right.
Maybe it doesn't even feel time the same way we do, but there's this feeling of it was unearthed by this action, by this previous atrocity. It may not be the source
actually,
of
that's
Tack.
interesting, because if you recall, it's explicitly unearthed by two railroad workers who nobly sacrifice themselves and blow themselves up in order to keep Tack from escaping, despite the fact that they've been treated with nothing but contempt by their foreman or whatever. So Tack is like, it's like Fern Gully. Tack is sealed by an act of intersectional, like, noble sacrifice, and then Tack is brought to the surface again by, like, they call it the China pit, and they're like callous about strip mining the earth or whatever. It's Tack always existed and is a discrete objective entity that exists, but still there's something in there about, like, you kind of brought it on yourselves by doing evil shit in Vietnam and whatnot.
Yeah. Specifically, even though they sacrifice themselves, the entire enterprise is done in the name of wealth and treasure for a ruling class. Whatever may result from the dig, which they don't know, but they're just have slaves and they're using them, I guess, because it doesn't really go into why they're digging in general. But once Tack's unearthed, a riot occurs. Like he inspires them all to, like, take down the establishment.
That's very King.
And the masters
also.
are killed.
Yeah.
Alongside the workers, everyone dies because Tack will just kill you all.
Tack makes you angry to be around.
His methodology to do, and this is where I think Stephen King's centrism is showing, which is fine. That's why he's very popular in America, circa the last 50 years. It makes sense because it's telling us exactly what we're supposed. If you, Tack says, "I do not die and I repay." That is something it literally says at one point. And I think it's interesting that you have this attenuation done by King to focus on, like, the enslavement of peoples and the idea of, like, well, you have to kind of, discard the lash. You have to address the, white colonialists in this case, or, your masters in the case.
Reckon with your own sins. Yeah.
And you have to abolish the very thought that they're your masters. That results in the killing of everybody. I don't think Stephen King's trying to say that it's like to riot causes this. He's usurping that and saying
definitely
like
not.
tack is just like
he's
a
just
force.
saying tack is evil. It's like the One Ring. It corrupts you to be around tack because it's so evil.
For sure. But it's just very interesting to me.
It is.
Oh, the other thing
But
I
it's a
noticed
stretch.
is that tack's language is vaguely Egyptian. Did you notice this?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a linguist, but there's a few syllables I recognize from other like Rosicrucian films, like Ammon and Tet. And this is it's some foreign language or it's some like ancient language that we're unaware of. But we have to hear it, and the way they went seemed pretty clearly Egyptian. Another symbol of enslavement.
Also, it's dumb that he uses a motorcycle helmet to keep him from being possessed, and that's all you need to not be possessed by the devil.
That is so dumb. It could because he puts down the flap, and that means that it can't like get into his mouth.
Yeah, it can't get into the
Even though
possession
it's inches
hole.
away.
The hole you got to go in to possess someone.
You're a smoke monster.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, can't get in through the chin now.
I give up.
It's like it's like sealed up in here. Yeah, I don't know what that was. Silly.
I think it's interesting that you talk about how he's just the embodiment of. It's funny because it's horror and it's about subversion of Americana, but in other ways, he has become wholesome Americana. But it's not that weird because towards the end of your career, you often become a boiled down, iconic version of the things you used to tackle with nuance, or like a parody of yourself. And I'm not saying he's full-fledged parody of himself, but it's just very interesting to me that this movie has the lines, "We were put on earth to love God and serve God." And like, I don't think that's ironic. I think it's kind of like Christian propaganda movie.
Yeah.
Or like it's the word of God if you think Christianity is accurate. But it's pretty straightforward. Like, God saves the day. They're all there. It's like almost felt like Left Behind. Like they were there on the explicit order. We're on a mission from God to kill Tack, and that's their whole purpose for being, good for them.
Yeah.
Such is the will of the Lord.
Yeah, so that's like kind of, it's interesting to me that the theme, like the thematic dramatic question of this movie is like trying to navigate the space of two questions. Well, question one, God's plan. If we follow that's what's
that's good.
Like save us, right?
And if something bad happens to you, just remember later God will, like, there was a reason. There's always a reason.
Right.
That's
so
the other
faith.
pillar. Yeah.
And then the other question is what kind of God, which is said by several characters at one point, what kind of God would do this? Fuck this God. That's literally a line in this. And that represents doubt. So we have faith versus doubt, right? And it's the movie's called Desperation. Why do you think? Why do we think it's called Desperation? Why do you think you did that?
I mean, I have my thoughts, but you're setting yourself up for the next beat of your essay. Go, girl.
The deconstruction of faith felt by a lot of people who have beliefs. I've noticed sometimes it's an act of desperation.
No atheists in foxholes.
Yeah, that it's how usually atheists are painted. Now that's a very atheist-centric.
Do you think
view.
he's slyly saying that all these Christians that he's depicting as the heroes are desperate?
No, I think it's definitely more positive than that. I think that in his heart of hearts, just based off reading it, it feels like Stephen King is just trying to tell everyone that like it's really good to
God is good, like, love is
God
good.
God is good though, right? You know, and that's great. But it's you do always set up a system when you tell stories like this within that system where you're trying to say, okay, faith will be rewarded. And non-faith or the absence of faith. And I don't mean someone who's like, oh, I hate faith. I just mean stories that are told that they just don't have faith. I don't know. People like migrant Chinese slaves or Native Americans. These people didn't have the same faith. What does that mean? So that's why their revolutions failed. I think that there's something in that, because it's all about normalcy. It's all about saying like, okay, this is Americana and this is the righteous way. Everything else.
Right.
And this is that.
And
And
it
that's
streamlines
that's like
everything.
Hollywood.
Well, that's if it's Clash of the Titans and everyone's just doing what God told them to do, like chess pieces, and it's really just God versus tack. That's what bothers me about the stakes of the thing structurally, is like the problem with the whole movie is summed up in this one interchange. So what does this tack want? It doesn't matter. It doesn't. No, all that matters is what God wants. Okay, well then just show the last scene of the movie and let's get out of here. Like if God is omnipotent, it's the Superman problem. I just find it inherently uninteresting when the answer is, oh, you just had to have faith because it was really just a roller coaster on a track and it was always going to safely end with God winning. Like, relax, man. Just let it happen.
Right.
I like the nihilist universe where you're like, if a character gets killed in this universe, then they're gone and we miss them. And it just feels more urgent and engaging to me to exist in that level of stakes.
I agree. It's interesting to me that we're getting out of the territory of King and more into the, cultural
From King to God.
Cultural shared vision of faith in America for the last hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, the CZ,
which I don't even feel
CSBF.
remotely qualified to talk about the nuances of. But I just am noticing through the story of this, like we see time and time again in these King stories, that the pioneer spirit of humans, another tenet of Americana, imagery like a gun or imagery or something like the idea of camaraderie between friends, believing in a greater power or God, Protestant like work ethic. These are things that King rewards his heroes for. He
Even
says, like,
as simple as love is good. That's in this movie. Love is good.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm not saying that Americana is bad. I mean, I think it's very flawed. Sometimes Americana is saying, like, be good to one another. I'm not disagreeing with the whole thing. I just wanted to point out that King uses the quote unquote Americana's good works or American good works, specifically like central or commonplace like belief structures. That's always the winner, and that is true of Hollywood. But it's interesting to me because it's always set up with like
but he's also serving his client. Like, who is his audience?
Yeah,
most of America. So who does he say is good? The most average type of American, like a Christian middle class American from the suburbs. They're gonna win.
And it becomes, and we kind of touched upon this on the It episode. I wouldn't call it like hypocritical by King, but he does this thing with outsiders a lot. And sometimes the outsider, something different can be the source of like great healing, like Jesus Christ, or it can be the source of great torment, like Tack. He uses this outsider imagery as both someone who is going to save us and someone who is going to doom us all the time. And so it begs the question about the Christ Antichrist thing, just the idea of like, do we know if the thing I'm looking at is a devil? And that's why his torment, Stephen King's tales about Americana and, sometimes mostly about the suburbs, even though he doesn't like to put his settings there, it is the suburbs because that was like the majority of America when he was.
Well, and this is
up.
a white middle class nuclear family as the primary.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon majority.
Yeah, driving through. They're not in the suburbs, but they're visiting from, you guessed it.
Yeah. And it's like, I think that there's this interesting neoclassical, I guess would be the word, kind of manipulation that he's doing, because usually that means it's like if you're ugly or repugnant in like neoclassical literature, that means you are an abomination. It's just, it's 1-to-1. King does this, but at the same time, as long as it's not grotesque or different enough, but more familiar and common, it's your salvation. So it's that, I just think that that's very fascinating to me, that the outsider trope in King becomes something where it's like, it's both, it's both things. It's what's different though. The through line though, what's different is like noticeable, I guess. I don't know what I want to say with this theory other than like, it's just the thing that he's really harping upon is this weird xenophobic kind of sensitivity. I find that interesting.
Wait, I've lost the thread. He's focused on, you're saying how he's always focused on how people hate the outsider, and that's a theme that he wants to bring up?
I think that I am just pointing out. Or are you
saying the fact that the Losers Club are outsiders and that's cool, but if you're too much of an outsider, it's not cool?
That's closer. It's more that he's super hypersensitive to the concept of the
band
outsider.
of outsiderness that you should belong to.
Yeah.
You should be River Phoenix from Stand By Me, but you shouldn't be, for example, Christian lady from The Mist who takes it too far. Like, it's interesting.
Take it too far. Yeah.
He is willing to show the bad side of Christianity. I mean, he has
absolutely.
Carrie as well.
Absolutely. But the idea, I think, or the trump card is really what's the most familiar? Like, what's the centrist, like, normal thing to do? Because even in The Mist, the crazy church lady,
right, but Tom Jane is probably Christian.
Cults.
He's just not a cultist. Yeah,
he's just not crazy about it.
But he probably is Christian. If you asked
absolutely.
him. Yeah,
I would say that, like, at least he feels evolved from that system. I don't know about the nuances because, like, I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that King is the worst offender in this regard because this is a trope that happens in almost every Hollywood movie ever because of just how white everything is. But I just think it's very interesting that this is seen as like ad hoc for King, this sensitivity and awareness of the duality of outsiders. It's almost like everything that he writes stems from this concept of the interplay of like who's the bad outsider and who's the good outsider. And that creates a very vicious system of morality, in my opinion. Or I just think that the hypersensitivity to it is not the greatest place to start a story if you're trying to tell moral tales, which I don't think that, King is necessarily saying that he is. But he does talk about these things.
Now with Desperation, I think he was more
stories.
interested in the gimmick of using the same cast twice in two different books, and he was just trying to do cool shit with tack.
I think that's probably
the vibe
right.
I get.
I just think it's interesting. Why is it about God then?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It almost feels like a cop-out where he's like, Americans will be fine with this if the ending is. But it is interesting that it's basically like the Americanized Christian God fighting a vaguely like Egyptian God. That's and we're rooting
they're not
for
even fighting.
We're rooting
in a sense
for
that we
bearded
understand.
Santa Claus God.
Like Tack is actually more familiar because he, at least the way he fights is like he sends out his minions. At one point he acts like Dracula. He like quotes Dracula.
He says, my children of the desert, can you hear them? Which of course is my children of the night, can you hear the sweet, such beautiful music they make?
Yeah. And quoting from the original Dracula and all that. Like, so he's a villain that you can kind of understand, right? Because he's like here. No,
but you don't understand.
Has acts and deeds.
Because they never set up like, if he can gather 5 hosts, then he can come into our world, or he wants the throne of Gilgamesh because then he'll control. Like, I just didn't like that Tack was unknowable to a degree that I didn't understand what the adversary's goals were. Yeah.
I'm saying something
like even a velociraptor in Jurassic Park,
yours.
at least it wants to eat flesh.
It's hungry. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good distinction to make. And on top of that, I was just going to add the idea that, and then on the flip side, you have God, who is also unknowable, but in a way that he doesn't even fight on our plane. His acts are done because of like serendipity of events that unfold, and then retroactively we go, that was God.
Mm-hmm.
And that justifies and, reaffirms my faith. And that's like very strange is that if our two competing claims are God or Tack, one is like a grunt on the lines and on Earth going, really going to task on murdering people for some reason. And God is just like, I'm going to figure it out. And
I'm just a mysterious force, and I work through children and shit.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, Tom Skerritt is, acting as God intended, I guess, and kills himself, but like saves the day. And that was his specific. That's why it's an explosion, because like, Vietnam, his flashback, all that, it all fits. It's all a story that like has the threads.
It's almost Shyamalan-esque. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Stephen King. He knows how to do that stuff.
Where
He's
your
really
past
good at
thing
it.
is manifest in the new thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Swing away.
But it's like,
swing away.
but when you, I don't know, just when you peel it back, you realize at the heart of it really is this thing where it's like, I as the writer, as God, get to choose who the hero is.
Right. A lot of the
wrong
book
about that.
is just a bumper sticker that says God is great. Love is God. God is love. Love is good.
Yeah. And we're a bunch of, heretics.
Curmudgeons.
So we, that doesn't work really on us. Spoilers, if it wasn't clear already. Both Mike and I share.
Oh, I'll totally
a
change
lack
my
of faith.
tune if the furry movie gets financed. Then I'll be like,
Oh, then it's God.
all glory to God. Thank you for this, my Lord.
I don't think you're understanding how God works, but that's fine. You do you, man.
Okay.
Sunday Catholics are people too. Okay.
Okay. Speaking of the minor
you know-
variations between our samey opinions, should we get to the
good.
rankings and see if they're in tune?
Yeah, actually, I want to ask you a question before we move on.
Okay.
There's a line that is like, I'm trying to understand as a writer, and I want to see if you understood what he was trying to say, Stephen King. At one point in the final, like in the throes of the final battle, Tom Skerritt says, Johnny says, Donald Rumsfeld, Adam Sandler, and Coulter demands you stop.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that line? Do you know what I'm talking about? What the fuck was that about? Like, what does that mean?
I thought he was, because it's like the power of Christ compels you. The power of Ronald McDonald compels you. The power of fucking Santa Claus compels you would be an equivalent run. I think Stephen King is just picking details of like celebrities that he views as powerful within the zeitgeist. And he's a very political dude, as we know from Twitter. So he threw in, he started with like Ann Coulter and Don Rumsfeld, people he hates. And then in the middle, he was like, and who do the kids think is of note? Who's in the zeitgeist? Adam Sandler's still hot.
That's so
Adam
funny.
Sandler. Yeah.
10 years ago.
But I do think it's just a joke of like, random name compels you.
All right. That
In the name
sates
of
my-
the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and Peter Griffin already. It's, it's just that bit.
I got the joke aspect of it. I just thought that the combination of elements, there was something I wasn't seeing. Like, there's a reason. I was looking a little bit more for, like, I had missed the boat that he is actually saying Larry, Moe, and Curly, and there's some connective tissue between the three of them that I wasn't aware of. No, it's just random nonsense because that's the joke. I see it now. Very,
It was a
pretty cringy.
threesome. It was a foursome he was in that he was just, spilling
That's
the tea. Sandler, Coulter, Rumsfeld.
No. Well, I think now we can enter our final stage.
Now the stand.
Time to make your stand.
This is where we rank them in order, ever lengthening segment. And we usually start at the top or start at the bottom in order to, by the way, this is episode 17. I think we're at or about at to surpass number of episodes of this podcast predecessor, Coen Brothers. So welcome to unknown territory.
Yeah.
The 18th episode of a deep dive film podcast. Anyway, I want to start at the top. I think that'll be more tense. Do you agree?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Oh, I'm really interested to see how high you put it, though, because the tone of your voice implies it's in top half. That would be amazing. But here we go. Number 1, The Shining.
The Shining.
Number 2, Dr. Sleep.
Stand By Me.
Number 3, Stand By Me.
Misery.
Number 4, Misery.
Dr. Sleep.
That's the unit.
That
will never change.
Yeah, it will.
All right. Number 5, The Mist.
The Mist. Hey.
There you go.
Fivers. Yeah.
So The Shining and The Mist, we unite on. Number 6, Dark Tower.
I'm going to go with Running Man. I enjoyed The Running Man.
Might be higher than Dark Tower deserves. I'm
think-
looking at you, Dark Tower. Number 7, Apt Pupil.
Hey, it's like 5 again. At Pupil.
Nice. prime numbers we match on. Number 8, Christine.
I'm going to go with The Green Mile. Yeah.
That's a big difference, yeah.
Huge
For me,
difference.
that's 15. But Christine the Evil Car won number 8. Number 9 for me is Running Man. We've come full circle.
This is where I'm going to throw you for a loop. Desperation. Yeah.
Okay. I'm emotionally grappling with that. I still stand by my ranking, but interesting. Desperation, number 9. So what was your 8 again?
Green Mile.
And what's your 10?
My 10 is Christine. I put
Green Mile, Christine,
Desperation over Christine, which was
Interesting.
directed by John Carpenter. Isn't
Yeah.
that crazy?
My number 10's Thinner, which was pretty bad. So now we're getting into the bad ones. So I consider Desperation a pretty mediocre one overall, although I did really like some of the performances. Number 11, Dead Zone.
That one's going to go to 1990s It for me.
Which is perfectly all right because my number 12 is 1990s It.
That's where I'm going to put Dead Zone. So
Almost a match.
Whoop, whoop.
So those just do-si-doed. And now the only piece of new information on my side, number 13, Desperation.
13, I put Dark Tower. So that's
Lucky 13. I rated Dark Tower 6.
Yeah,
That feels wrong.
You love
I
that
might need to
story.
change that.
You were talking. You almost can. You made me bring it up higher.
But 6 is quite high.
6 is quite high.
It might, but
I
it's
mean,
hard
we got
to go.
A Green
it's hard
Mile
to,
situation is
and
all
then
we
Apt
got.
Pupil is by like evil people, so it's hard to bump it up.
There's so
But,
many things going on. That's
yeah.
why I always thought that this section is stupid, just because it's like it's thumbs up, thumbs down.
To me, it's a running joke of doing a segment that is a waste of everyone's time that we would never normally do. Like,
That's
you're
true.
right. This is the exact type of filler segment that we're
God.
usually above. We would
should
not
be-
do this.
We really should be funnier during this segment if we're doing
This
it.
should be hilarious.
This should be
Dreamcatcher's
hilarious.
14 for me.
14's Thinner for me.
Let's at least be fast. 15's Green Mile.
1979 Salem's Lot.
16 Maximum Overdrive.
I Hate You Forever. It's Dreamcatcher. God damn it.
And then 17, the bottom of the barrel.
I don't
1979 Salem's Lot, which,
I
by the way,
don't
I've
understand
gotten
it, so-
so much hate for. And people not even saying it's good, just saying, I've gotten so many messages of people going, come on, it's not the worst. And I'm like,
you
yeah, it
put
is. It's the
dead
worst
last.
one.
You put it under
Maximum Overdrive and Dreamcatcher.
and you shit on a movie more than I've ever heard in an hour with Green Mile. It is still worse than Green Mile. I don't remember you talking about Salem's Lot ever being like damaging to the
No, it's
to
just
the
boring.
culture of America. No, you were
It's
just
the greatest
like, this
sin
is
of all.
so
Boring. Yeah.
It needs to die.
I agree.
I find that's hilarious, but I reserve that for Maximum Overdrive just because that movie shouldn't be a movie.
Yeah. But
like
at
it
least
should-
it's an artifact of something
It
funny.
really is impressive. It's impressive that it was made, it was agreed upon, and I'm
Mhm.
watching it, and I'm there, and the movie's there, and it's terrifying.
And we all win somehow.
We all win somehow, I guess.
So
No,
yeah,
fuck that
people
movie.
also got upset. People who love Maximum Overdrive got upset with that rating. But I think, look,
They're
I'm not saying I don't love the experience. I'm saying it's a
Fools.
17 or it's a 16 out of 17. You
Yeah,
know, on
it's dead
a
last.
list of good movies. But that it can still be fun as hell.
I
right.
agree. I just don't think that's what was intended.
In order
And
to
that's
put
how
a
I
little
do it.
more oomph into this segment, I've liked the trend of calling our shot. You want to call our shot and decide what to watch next time?
Hell yeah.
All right. I loaded my old Wikipedia list of adaptations of works by Stephen King. Creep Show. Still haven't done any of the Creep Shows. We haven't done the Pet Cemetery.
Ooh. Do we want to step away from the Mick Garrises of the world and not do another TV thing and do a cinema?
Tommy Knockers, Langoliers, Cinema. Cinema's got, there's a lot of TBA. We're going to be doing this podcast for a while.
Mhm.
But
I also think we can take a break and do like a mini series of some kind if you want ever.
I could do Mercy. I could do Cell. No, I feel like a movie.
I feel like a movie. We have either
Hearts in
Carries
Atlantis.
just sitting right there. We're gonna have to do Cujo eventually.
Mhm.
Children of the
Mangler?
Corn, I've never seen.
Me neither.
Mm.
Fritz Kirsch. You mean 1984's Children of the Corn.
Mm-hmm.
Synopsis: supernatural folk horror film based on a short story of the same name.
I know it's got the little girls with the eyes.
King wrote the original draft of the screenplay. And it's set in the fictional town of Gatlin, Nebraska. I'm sold. Let's watch Children of the
Children
Corn.
of the Corn, 1984's Children of the Corn,
All right, Children of the Corn. Next time, Children of the Corn.
directed by Fritz Kirsch. And it's one of the, it's like one of the first, it's like the fifth or sixth thing that was made based off Stephen King adaptations. Look at that. All right. Until see you in a month, I guess.
I love corn. Is it a month? Do we go a whole month between these?
Usually 3 weeks to a month. Yeah. That's
Well, there's frame rate. There's other ones in between. They can stop bitching about it.
And you can really see what we're up to when you go to patreon.com/smallbean.
/small beans.
We got a lot of.
See, you keep plugging. You keep sending people to just the Patreon homepage, and it's not as useful as you think it is.
I love it. I love it.
It doesn't build the brand.
It's a great webpage. I go to it every day. It's so. Love
and
going
it's been a long time since we said this. So if you've listened this long, it really does move the needle for us if you go onto Apple Podcasts, like the iTunes store, and toss us a review, toss us some stars.
And I want to make an announcement.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just won't wrap up.
When you're listening to this, for the patrons, we have a surprise coming out very soon, within 1 week's time, maybe even Friday. We're gonna have.
It better be Friday.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Are you thinking you won't make the deadline?
No, I'm just saying. Yeah, it's gonna be Friday. I just wanted to keep it suspense.
Okay, good.
Thanks. But yeah, we gotta. I don't want to tell everything, but just expect something big in the Patreon. That's all.
Tack. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.